Hi everyone, I see a few familiar faces in the audience. And so I have come here to talk about healthy longevity and global prosperity, the hype, the hope, and the how. So I'm going to start off by talking about all the incredible things that we're seeing on the horizon, also temper it with a little bit of, I guess, a reality check, and then look at how we can really deliver on healthy longevity for all and to deliver the global prosperity that all of us want. So Sean did the very good job of, talking about a few hats that I wear. So you'll see a few logos on there. So I run, and the hat that I'm very much wearing today is having founded Longevity International with Dmitry Kaminsky, who also runs Aging Analytics Agency. There's a few details in my slides that refer to that. King's College London. Now, Stephen is from King's College London, but we're also just working with King College London, setting up an AI preventative health venture. And other organizations there are all behind Longevity International, which we set up just a few months ago, and actually is behind the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Longevity, which I'll come on to in the last part of my presentation. So now I wanted to start off with the good news, because this is a Singularity event. You know, we want to focus on all the amazing things that are happening in science and technology, which of course there are, and also the business and commercial potential of all these. Now I think, and I was briefed that there's probably a few people wearing the money hat in this audience. There's probably a few enthusiasts on the science, but if you're an investor, one of the big things to be really happy about is the longevity economy is significant and is growing fast. And that's partly to do with the fact that we are all growing older. There are 10 million people in the UK in retirement age. And of course, adding that up globally, there are 1 billion people in retirement age, which shows just how the aging demographic is really an incredibly significant force. And I'll come on to the sheer commercial market potential of that. And I think if there are any investors in this space, there is a huge amount of money to be made about recognizing that the plus 50 population is huge, it's growing, and they have very high aspirations, especially us baby boomers, of which I'm one. So we've got a few stats there. The longevity economy, if you add up, if you look at the GDP of the global economy at the moment, which is about $87 trillion, about 20% of that you can extrapolate to the longevity economy, which is 17 trillion. So that's quite a large market. So that's good news if you are an investor and want to make a lot of money. Now, the scientific progress is absolutely staggering. Now, I'm not going to go into the details because I know Attila and I know Stephen will go into more of this, but it really is, if you are a scientist or you enjoy your science, I mean, literally there is stuff happening every single day, and you'll see it in the press. So this slide here, and there are different sort of philosophies. SENS has sort of 7 hallmarks of aging. Here are 9, which was published a little while ago in Cell. It basically tells you all the things happening which are really at the heart of really understanding the whole physiological cellular basis of aging. Now, I studied genetics 30 years ago, and telomeres were all the rage there. Well, you know, it's literally, there is so much happening. Epigenetics, you know, the expression of our genes, and I know I've got a few people in the audience who I know are very, very active in that world. So it really is quite staggering. So I think there's, and I won't go into the science, but I think if you do want to go into the science, I mean, literally, it is mind-blowing. And of course, with that, there's significant investment money going into that world. I mean, if you read the daily press, Juvenescence, they've just succeeded in raising £100 million for the latest round of funding. Ligenesis, Foxbio, Agex, these are all companies that are really, going places. In Silicon Medicine, another company to watch, they've just had their AlphaGo moment, which is written up, where they've, the sheer pace of discovery at an R&D level in the pharma world through AI is absolutely astounding, how they can literally crunch down the time, which used to take years, down to weeks. And this is the reality of AI hitting us now. I mean, it is actually pretty mind-boggling. So I mentioned the significant market of all of us growing older. We've got, if you add it all up, the plus 50 market, and there are a few companies who have realized that if they really understand the 50 plus market and the aspirations that we have, they will be on to a significant winner. We are actually, if you add us all up, the plus 50 market, we are the third largest market after the US and China. So that's actually quite a big market. Now, this is a very dense mind map, again, courtesy of my business partner, Dimitri, from Aging Analytics Agency. That just paints a picture in the UK. And again, I can help you access all these reports, these interactive mind maps. That just shows you the sheer level of activity that is happening. Now, we know the UK has a huge strength in terms of its fintech marketplace. We've got a very vibrant tech ecosystem that rivals Silicon Valley, even despite Brexit, dare I say the word. We've got an incredibly strong life sciences industry. We have got talent. We have got so much here, which it would be a shame to squander whatever happens with Brexit. We have just got so much potential, and you can see it on this map here in terms of the investors, the companies, the non-profits, the life sciences, who are all based here, who are doing wonderful, amazing things, which are on this next map, which again, if you look at all the different areas which are at the heart of going back to that hallmarks of aging slide, regenerative medicine, gene therapy, biomarkers, that's fascinating, aging biomarkers, and there's some amazing experts in Silicon Medicine there. Age tech, of course, is another, microbiome, these are all areas that are incredibly vibrant, fertile. There are lots of UK companies here, all looking for investment, and just shows the sheer amount of energy and commitment and money that is going into this space. Now, also taking a global look, we have seen, and no one will dispute this, through advances in science and knowledge and technology, in terms of life expectancy, it has been on the rise for quite some time. Now, that's really good news, and we're seeing that, in all over the world, including Africa. Of course, it used to be the infectious diseases that used to destroy it used to be the problem with our mortality. Now, that's been kind of conquered, and now, of course, we've got a whole rise of other types of diseases that we're trying to conquer, which, of course, is very much the focus of a lot of the aging research now. And again, I won't go into the detail, but it's a fascinating, if you look at the real hot end of aging, really trying to understand, at the heart of a lot of these chronic diseases, many of which are lifestyle driven, they all have, some common roots, which of course is now the real attention of a lot of the drug and pharma efforts today. But now, so this is all fantastic news. So it's amazing. There's so much promise and potential. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the bad news, because we are living in a real world. And I don't know if any of you saw this in the New York Times about a week ago. Life expectancy, the first edition said it was falling. They had to correct it because actually, and there's a bit of what's really happening in the UK? Life expectancy, despite many years of growth in life expectancy, it has actually now started to stall. And I was speaking to Attila a bit earlier today. In some age groups, it is actually starting to drop. Now, this is despite the fact that we've got an NHS which looks after us. It is despite the fact that there are all these developments going on. What the hell is going on? So the New York Times had to quickly change its headline, falling to stalling, and I wrote about it because actually what we're seeing, which is really the problem, if you look, so I talked about falling life expectancy becoming the new climate change of health, which there are other people who think about this as well, and it's not going to be a technological fix that's going to solve this. Look at this. This is a chart that shows that actually, if you look at the US, and actually this was written about, life expectancy is actually dropping, which is like the US spends twice as much money on healthcare as any other developed countries in the world, and yet their life expectancy has been falling, and it's actually quite shocking. Actually, despite, and you can see on this graph, even despite that, look how low their life expectancy is compared to other countries. So this is a real wake-up call for quite a lot of us, I think, to understand what is actually at the heart of what is going on. So I would say to Singularity and all these amazing scientists, let's really look at and dig deep and really try and solve some of these other problems. that are going on. So that's what I'm going to come on to. So in the UK, we actually have the situation where actually, so the previous slide I talked about how health inequalities are linked with income inequalities. And actually here, the Office for National Statistics, again, after many, many years saying, oh, great, life expectancy and healthy life, it's all growing. Actually, what we're finding is that, and what's the most serious thing that's happening is that health inequality, so the gap between healthy life expectancy between the richest and poorest citizens is actually growing, and it's now 18, 19 years, which is pretty shocking, which, again, is a sign that we must look at this and try and do something about it, because health inequality is not good for anybody. So just in a little bit more detail, so Public Health England, of course, are on the case here. They have done some interesting look, and if you look, so for example, in terms of some of the stats, again, taking a life course approach, because we're not just looking at old populations here, we're looking across the board. Age under 75 mortality from cardiovascular disease, if you really want to tackle something, is cardiovascular disease, 4 times worse between poor and rich. So it shows there's a massive area of problem there. And actually look at respiratory disease as well. So again, and look at mortality from causes considered preventable. Diabetes, which is often the gateway to a lot of the problems that we see with all these other chronic diseases. There's a massive, massive issue there. So, and I know I don't want to get too gloomy here, but I do have a solution coming up. Now, again, if you read the New York Times, because we try and, some of the commentators, they've been probing underneath this fall in American life expectancy, saying, well, what the hell's going on here? It's a travesty that, perhaps the starkest measure of the failure of our economic policies is that the average American's life expectancy is in decline. So I think market economics, it's not working, because market capitalism doesn't work in a vacuum. Social, environmental, we need to focus on that. And I think this is what is really coming on. I think there's some really interesting views talking about, whatever you want to call it, mission-based capitalism, whatever you want to call it, the fact is solving real human problems is the key to our global prosperity. Now, root causes. You might have heard of Michael Marmot. He did he's a very well-known advocate of, expert in looking at health generally in the economics of health. He wrote this book, The Health Gap. Now, he was on the Radio 4 a little while ago, a few days ago, talking about rotten life syndrome. The real problem behind a lot of these figures is what you see on this list here. In fact, the Center for Regressive Policy published some interesting work that goes into detail here. We know that the real underlying problems, and if you hear about all the stuff that we're hearing of the opioid crisis in the States, Angus Deaton, it's this sort of like rotten life, death by despair is often what Angus talks about. There are these real issues, and it's about income, it's about education, it's about crime, it's about housing. And of course, a lot of these things are also linked to a lot of the frustrations and issues around climate change, transport policy. So everything is interlinked, and it's all about these really difficult human problems that we're facing around the world, and certainly in the developed world. So what are we going to do about it? So this is where Singularity and everyone who wants to solve these real human problems, this is our task. Now, I'm involved in trying to do that in some way through the work that I'm doing through the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which was set up only a few months ago, and very quickly we have convened the most incredible group of scientists, business leaders, parliamentarians, and the task that we set ourselves, Theresa May, when she was still in power, she made an announcement about a year and a half ago, and she's trying to tie together the linkages between the grand challenges. I don't know how much you know about the significant amount of government money that's going into these tech areas. So she said, right, we need to achieve by 2035, 5 extra years of healthy life expectancy. So that was something that she talked about, but it was like, well, how are we going to get there? And also this closing the social gap was also something that has started to really, really become more of the issue here too. And what we want to do, and of course, we talk about all this promise. The biggest problem that we have is that aging, even the Aging Society Grand Challenge is talked about as this problem, it's a challenge. We've got to think about things in a much more positive way, because there is a huge opportunity about the fact that we have science and technology that obviously has a huge role to play in all this. Not the only role, but a huge role. And we have got, and especially with Brexit looming and all the rest of it, we've got all the ingredients that it takes to be a real leader in this space. So let's just seize that opportunity. So we set ourselves up the task to come up with a national strategy. So we're 4 months in, and already we have just, and coming on to the next, I'll talk about a few people. So there's some faces you might now, I've just showed the parliamentarians, and there's about 100 people who are already involved in the advisory boards and things like that. You can see some familiar faces like Matt Hancock. We've got Camilla Cavendish. Lord Filkin has been a huge force running the Strategic Advisory Board chair. We've got Bob Kerslake. We've got Lord Willits. We've got Camilla Cavendish. So there's a lot of very well-known sort of parliamentarians involved, which gives us, and Lord O'Shaughnessy, so it gives us a certain amount of clout, which is great, because we need that clout to really start to really drum home the message that we have to think whole society, whole government, do things in a totally different, bold, radical way. Big ideas, the idea bombs is what we're tasked with. And Damien Green, who was the chair of the APVG, was really keen on that. And Matt Hancock supported us at our launch, which is great. So what we're doing now is we're running a national consultation. The initial closing date was on the 9th, which was 2 days ago. We've now kept it open till the end of this month because we had a whole bunch of people, and we've been really, really pleased with how many people have come in to get involved. How are we going to do this? And we're going to pull together a national strategy. Now, I'm not interested in the report per se. I'm interested in action. So, of course, the action and what are going to be that handful of real drivers that are really going to make the difference here by taking a very, very bold cross-sector. And we're looking at everything from science, genomics, technology, business, innovation, public attitudes, public health, population health. I mean, all the different ingredients that we have to look at. So, now, some of the things that are emerging, and some of you, if you are in the health space, you'll have seen some of the things that are coming out, which is great. So this whole notion of health as an asset that we have to protect. A lot of us don't think about health as an asset, but actually it is now starting to be talked about in Public Health England, and of course the Prevention Green Paper, which just came out. Now, we've got places like New Zealand, who have a whole new way of measuring the success of their society, going back to, well, the old way of market economics and capitalism. Like the New Zealanders, they're saying, well, actually GDP, rather than look at the nation's success by GDP, let's look at well-being. So of course that has focused them on a whole different set of societal priorities. Poverty, crime, mental health are their big things that they're looking at the moment, because they see that as really important. So these are all good, and this is what is emerging. And of course, what came out in the Prevention Green Paper, which is out for consultation, will be published sometime next year, is this whole notion of health, health as just lost my train of thought. The composite, an index for health, which is a very different way of actually measuring success of all the things that we're doing in the NHS. So that's good. Now, the other things that we're looking at, of course, are policies that will drive behavioural change. So just speaking to some people, behavioural change is, and getting the public to really see this as important, to protect their health, to see their health as an asset. These are massively important, because behavioural change is the hardest thing of all. So we've got people like David Halpern from Behavioural Economics Unit involved helping us with this. And we've seen in some of the recent sort of publications, for example, Lancet just came out a couple of months ago, that shows, yes, the obvious areas that we need to look at is tobacco control, alcohol, physical activity, and food. Now, these are obvious in many ways to all of us, but actually how are we going to drive that behavioural shift is the really difficult issue. And of course, there are different ways of doing that. You can get the individuals to do it, for those who are motivated, or you can use a whole bunch of different sort of policy, fiscal means, all these taxes. So these are all the things. In fact, just a few days ago, this paper came out, written about all over in the press, how a tax on snacks could have a major impact on obesity, which of course is a massive, massive problem. So these are all the things that we're looking at. We're also looking at this whole notion, because we know politics at a national level is in such disarray and chaos and all the rest of it we know about. But actually there's amazing stuff happening in local place space. And we were just talking about that earlier with Pierre about, we were looking at community crypto. We were talking, there are all kinds of amazing things that are happening in the community level. It's communities, and there's amazing stuff happening all over the UK, which are not getting the attention they deserve, because despite austerity and all these sorts of things, they're actually doing amazing things in their community through, and these are just some examples of that. and charities and third sector, they're all involved, and it's really showing that a collaborative approach, really looking at place-based approaches, is really starting to work, and that's really where we are going to see some impact. Of course, we need to see a shift from treatment to prevention. So, over time, we know that preventative and predictive technologies are going to become much more important, and the whole dial will shift that way. And of course, all the stuff that KCL are doing is all on that, and of course, all the hotbed of aging and science, research, technology is all around that. And of course, now what we have to do is change how the NHS measures its activity, and of course it's all around prevention getting much more budget, but also the metrics around that, so that the whole focus is on how do we keep people healthy and well. So of course that is going to be a huge focus of what we have to do. Now of course, and I hope I've got a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Data, the data explosion, the convergence we're seeing, and I'm talking about the whole life data that we're seeing, it is, extraordinary. We saw a few slides about that. I think by 2035, there's going to be 1 trillion computers. It is absolutely mind-boggling, the amount of data that is currently being created and will be created. And we know at the moment, we're only focused in a lot of policy, and of course you look at the NHS, on that 10% of what actually really drives the social determinants of health, the sick data, when actually it's all this other data, it's social, behavioral, it's genomics now, of course, is a much bigger part. These are all, and of course with that, so all this data outside the medical record is actually the really important data in terms of understanding what's going to keep us healthy and well, which all of us, that's going to solve the NHS's problems. We want the NHS to shrink. We don't need it to grow, we want it to shrink because we're all keeping healthy and well. That would be a really good outcome. So we also are looking, so of course that's going to be a big part of what we're doing in terms of the national strategy. The other thing, and with that data and with what we're seeing, business models need to change. The pharma model, the insurance model, all these different industries, pensions, they're all built on a paradigm that is not fit for purpose. So that has to change. So that's going to, and of course data and all these sorts of things and all the brilliant minds, and it will take leadership and it will take bravery to avoid the Kodak moments that you talked about. This is what's going to happen to those industries that don't change. And this is just a slide again from Aging Analytics Agency, which just paints a picture of some of the areas where we're going to see a lot of activity. Neuroscience, medicine, preventative health, age tech. We need better, different financial products that are going to incentivize people to save. We need products to help, motivate us to keep healthy. And of course, there's all kinds of, amazing stuff that really could be happening in terms of unlocking. This is like de-risking longevity and all the things that I don't have that much knowledge about in the city to unlock the billions of pounds that are sitting in the city ready to be spent on really smart investment to deal with the housing, the transport, all the things that are going to keep us healthy and well. That money needs to find a better home than being squandered in stuff that actually really isn't going to drive that impact that we want to see. Now, just a very quick word on other countries, because of course the UK is one, and of course we've got huge potential, but there are a lot of countries that are really interesting, doing some amazing work. I just wanted to pull up, probably a lot of you have heard about what Estonia are doing. Of course, they've got a whole e-citizen program. They have a system where the citizen can access their information on their terms, and it's an incredible thing that they have done as an economy, as a country. So I think there are many lessons. I was out with a bunch of senior stakeholders from the NHS and Academic Health Science Networks taking to Estonia to see how they do it. And they're doing amazing stuff, with data, with systems, and that's something to watch. And I won't. And of course, everything comes through a secure citizen ID number. Finland, again, a culture and a society that's built very much on well-being. They have just passed legislation on secondary use of data, which is going to completely unlock innovation at many, many different levels, certainly in the health space. And again, they're working with Estonia. They have the accelerator project, which is all about their whole ecosystem around access to information services, both public, private sector. So they're really interesting. And again, they have a culture. And of course, these two countries, the citizen trusts their government. So that is why they're also prospering in this new digital world with their systems. Quick note, you've probably heard of blue zones. I think just to kind of finish my presentation, there's a lot that we can learn from what seems to be the secret of a long, happy, healthy life in some of these blue zones, and Sardinia is often one. Of course, Japan. There are various areas around the world where, for some reason, people are living extremely long lives. And actually, when you look at all and you really drill down, what is the secret of success? It kind of comes down to those. I mean, there's a few on this slide: moving naturally, right outlook, right tribe, eat wisely. There's an expression. So a lot of it is about, and ageism I haven't talked about, but if you look at these societies, they venerate their old. They are valuable citizens. Their wisdom is valued. So that's a huge factor. And I think that's a massive thing that, as this APPG, we have to counter. Social connections, family, the family unit, all those sorts of things are really, really strong. Ikigai, which is a word that Japanese use, which is this feeling, a reason for being, which is all around purpose. People live a longer life when there's something for them to live for. So that's really important. Healthy food and active lifestyles, which is, again, very much, I know, we're going to come on to the next presentations. It doesn't seem like rocket science, really, when you think about it. So why are we going so wrong when we've got so many science, technology, and tools to be able to really solve some of these problems? So that's it. So thank you very much for listening.